Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And I'm Mojan. I'm founder of Relvera. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for joining me on this topic. This is one that I'm quite sure when we were chatting before we hit record is like, all right, it's enough. And I prefaced, knowing you're just coming on board as a co-host here, I said, please don't feel that I'm cutting you off when we talk about a topic and then we just start talking about it. And it takes practice to stop when it's an interesting topic. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. But it sounded like it was from you knew you were going to be in this recording session and joining the show, and you asked a friend what they'd like to hear about. So give us a little more background on where this topic came from for today.
Yes, I was speaking with a friend of mine just before we got on the call, and I mentioned to him, I said, I'm going on a podcast and we're going to talk about reliability. What would you like to hear about? And him and I used to work at Google together. So he comes from a consumer electronics background, and I have worked in automotive and consumer electronics, and now a bit in medical systems. And the challenge that the interesting contrast between, consumer electronics and cars are both high volume manufacturing, but they are different in the way that it impacts reliability, in the sense that with consumer electronics, when you want to confirm that your product is reliable at one phase of the product development cycle, you're probably going to be doing some testing, just like as you would with cars. But it's generally probably easier to get consumer electronics components and modules and systems to test for reliability when you're testing consumer electronics versus cars. It's a bit more difficult, certainly harder to justify to as a reliability engineer.
You're not going to get 600 cars to just take out and destroy.
You're not going to get many cars to be able to test to show that your product is reliable. So, yeah. So he was interested in hearing about how it's different between automotive and consumer electronics.
Well, years ago, I worked with a networking company that was making a car installed router. It was a wireless system, and it was intended to go in like fleet cars, so that if you're on a job site, or I think in a police department or whatever, that vehicle then would be a hub for connecting to the whatever company or agency that was their system electronically. And if you ever peered into, hopefully not from the back seat, a squad car these days, is they have a computer mounted on that thing.
Yes.
And they're checking, they can check all kinds of stuff about you before they even pull you over, although they shouldn't be driving and typing at the same time, I imagine. But that has to be sent out. And they were using, instead of cell systems, they were trying to use other communication networks and systems and keep things private and stuff like that. And it was a small stack of cards on a cage that was going to be installed under the seat.
Oh, interesting. Under the seat.
Yeah. And I said, what happens if a French fry falls on it?
Yeah. Yes.
Or somebody spills a drink, or and they were already thought about vibration and stuff like that. Not enough, but they did. Yet at least it wasn't under the hood of the car or on the bottom of the carriage. That would be, much harsher.
Yeah.
Yet my first thought is, consumer electronics have been optimized, and all of our components have been optimized because of the volumes of laptops, desktops, and cell phones. And the cell phone industry has really miniaturized a whole slew of our components. And it's a luxury when you have a desktop and you have this great big space to spread out your electronics and do all kinds of whatever you want on the electronics. Whereas when you try to put it into under the seat of a car, and it's got to miss all the other moving parts down there and be protected from somebody sticking their foot in there and kicking it and all the other things that can happen to it. It becomes a real challenge to design it so that it works there. But my first thought is it's that consumer electronics are optimized for the office, for the home, and then for handhelds. And they don't see anywhere near the stresses, environmental stresses that a car does, even the
Hmm.
interior of a car.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking simple FR4, with a couple hundred components on it would be fine on a desktop. A simple board like that would be just a no-brainer these days with the technology we have and the experience we have of designing them. It just would be dirt simple.
Hmm.
Yet put it in a car, it might not only
Totally
last
different
6 months.
environment. Yes. Very different environment. Do you think that it's how does the time come in, like time factor? How much does it play a role in this? Like on a desktop, of course, like it can last forever, but of course it's, um I think that's part of the challenge, right? Is the car is also not other components in the car last longer than a typical consumer electronics portion component might last. Because like we were talking about, like you can have a car should really be able to function for 10 years. Do you think that for consumer electronics, like if it was on a desktop, can it do 10
Well,
years?
it can. It takes a bit
Yeah.
of a different design though, right? If the technology of how we interface with the computer or they want to add features, it's like the early GPS systems is you could go get new maps uploaded to it. Now it's all dynamic and done off outside the device itself. It's just wired, it's connected. Whereas before they wanted $600 from me to update the maps on this on a in-car GPS system. Like, you gotta be crazy.
Yes.
I'm gonna use my phone instead.
Yes.
It's like, but the car was sold before phones were available. So there's going to be
Mm.
technology updates and improvements and so on. And I'm thinking of the first screens being put into cars. They were little more than a fancy lap or a fancy tablet. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think they thought through the vibration, and it uses 48 volts versus 120 types things, and it had to have some adjustments to it. Yet I have no idea. I'd love to be the fly on the wall saying, how did they think through future proofing it so that they could add features to it? They could update it on the fly. They could, maybe it had to go in a garage and be serviced and updated, and so on. Yet I had one of those fail, and it was on I want to say Chevy, but it might have been a Ford. No, no, I'm drawing a blank. It was a minivan back in those days for me, and they had a small screen, touch screen on the dash, and they said, no, we can't fix that. And I said, what do you got to do? He says, well, it costs $1,000 to pull the dashboard out and unwire this thing and if we can find another one, we'll stick it
Yeah.
in there. How about I just put duct tape over the top of it?
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, you were saying that, how did they think about future proofing it? And I'm like, did they? Do you think that they would have? I
You
think
would
it's,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
you would think, but it's also hard to know what the future is going to be like. So it's hard to know what you're future proofing it for.
well, at least make it repairable.
Yes.
That was an
Terrible. Yeah.
oversight big time. They really
Yeah.
believed it was going to last 10 years or 20 years or whatever it was. It didn't last 6 months. And, and it's going to cost that much to fix it. And then I brought up that I only bought it 6 months ago. So that might be under warranty. And so they paid for it. Yet, what an oversight of just, I mean, the
Yes.
when I started driving, I wanted to update the radio in my car, and I went to a big box store, bought a new radio, and it came with instructions to unwire it from the back, hold these two tabs open, and slide the radio out, slide the new one in. It was a cassette fit, it was a standard size. A lot of cars had it, so people could buy radios that fit into any car.
Yep. Believe it or not, I remember that. I am familiar.
Okay, but we
Yes,
don't have that
absolutely.
anymore. Every single
No.
dashboard's different now,
Yes, everything is
and
very integrated.
It's one of the I got an offer or a request from a startup that was making basically the electronic um, license plates, and I like, so what is this product? And apparently they've got it improved enough and they developed it enough that it's actually being used in California. I've seen one on a car at a garage when I was getting my car smogged, and it was little more than a laptop strung up to the back of your car.
Oh,
And uh,
interesting.
how in the world is that going to work? Here's this fragile screen, and at least it's not on the front of the car where we could get direct strikes from all kinds of stuff. But I'm looking at all the dings and bang ups and stuff in cars on the roads these days. Somebody just taps the back of your bumper and has just the right
Done.
shield
Yes.
on it that hits your license plate. Now you're driving without a license or license plate because it goes
Yes.
and somehow they got it through. And I don't really know what the advantage was. I never did understand the business model or why this was a solution to anything. Um, Yet I just went, "Are you crazy?"
Well, I
It's
think that's the thing, right? The conditions in the vehicle like really require that you have to one have a good understanding of the conditions in the vehicle.
Mhm.
And how you make sure that your products are going to meet these requirements is you got to, of course, design for reliability and to
Yeah,
verify is you have to verify it at the lower levels. You have to test your components on, in a way that hopefully resembles the conditions of the vehicle. And that's how you can demonstrate that you have more
yeah.
reliable, you have your reliable components because yeah, you can't. But yeah, I mean the you have to have a good understanding of the conditions. And yes, like a simple rear end collision can, damage
A
uh,
thousand dollar component,
damage $1,000 components exactly. So you have to take into account the requirements of the for and there's so much. I would love to be able to share uh with uh with people who are not as familiar with the engineering that goes into vehicles, like how many hours of meetings there are about discussing what the requirement should be, and is someone going to do this, is someone not going to do this, and
Mhm.
what is the difference between like regular use and more
Heavy use,
extreme
yeah.
usage, more heavy use, and do we protect for it, do we not protect for it? Like there's
Well,
many hours of meetings and
yeah, it's a
discussions on that.
reliability issue. That's a whole other
Yes.
topic. Yet, my experience is that if you have a good marketing team that keeps track of what exactly the customers are trying to solve, and then what my experience was with inkjet printers, and they had basically a book they would give to and they were constantly updating it, and it was for the design team's reference, but it had five scenarios for printing. One was a certain percentage of the expected customer base for this business printer would be a broker that prints full color, handouts for their houses, and they do it every day in pretty heavy full color printing. And they had four other scenarios, and one was you use it once a month to print out a report for your school kids, and it's all black and white, and there's nothing fancy about it.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of other use cases. And they talked about the environments they're in. They talked about the weather conditions, usage patterns, frequency of use, types of use, all kinds of stuff. And it was added then that this is the 80th percentile of this distribution, or the
Mm.
temperature range is not plus or minus
Yes.
plus this minus that. It's here's the distribution, and we're designing for the 90th percentiles on both ends because there's
Mhm.
enough customers in that range that we want them to have a good experience with our product. It was pretty sophisticated how they knew their customers, and how we knew the shipping processes, how well we knew all kinds of stuff to enable designers to make those trade-offs. And so that really, influenced me. And little I know about the auto industry is some teams are better at that than others. Some saying we're going to design what we want and they're going to like it or not. And others are going to get tons of information and make some really decent decisions that serves their clients, their customers. So I,
Yes.
every
The
business
data.
does it different.
Yes, I think totally. And the data is the holy grail. That's the incredibly powerful tool that you can use when you're going through these decisions is the data of and I've done that. I mean, we've done that in cases where we have the data, definitely. Like we would use it to show, whether the customers like we were like, this is going to be so popular, and then and then you look at the data like, oh, actually it's not that
No,
popular
it's not that
or
big a
something is
deal.
more popular than. But the trick there is the challenge there can also be, for the next generation or maybe a slightly different platform, for example, or a different platform that you're working on. You have to be careful to not maybe direct like thoughtfully use the data that you do have from another product for decision making for a future product because it may not necessarily apply one to one.
That's right.
But still very useful.
Another whole aspect that we didn't touch on is the consumer electronics usually have an ecosystem built around them, and you get to the Apple Store for your apps, and then if you go to a new machine, you can load them onto that. Where if you're a Microsoft environment, it's this way. If you're a Samsung environment, you get kind of locked in. A lot of consumer electronics try to, well, toasters maybe not. It's a consumer electronics, but yet I purposely looked for a coffee maker that would sync up with my home's automation system and voice control system.
Oh,
And
nice.
so
Yeah.
we almost never
It's
use it
it's
that way,
it's
but it was
yeah, I was
part of the
gonna say, do
purchase.
you use it?
We did. We have a
Okay.
couple of times just for
Yeah.
fun. The one was that, like the faucet is, we updated our faucet to a touch system, and it had a feature of a little module that made it a smart faucet. So you could ask your smart speaker, I want to wash my hands, and it would give you a splash of water and then 20 seconds of or whatever it was for hand washing, and then it would turn on the rinse. And or you say, I need 2 cups of water, and it poured just 2 cups of water. It was pretty cool. And for whatever reason, it's not working. So that's my next call today, is to get a hold of support. Always a good time.
Interesting.
That's another
Interesting.
whole topic, which is
Yes.
more of a
Yes.
rant on my part, but it's
No, but it's fascinating. Yeah, like do you how I'm very fascinated because I'm curious, like do you find there was this whole debate there is ongoing, I assume, in both consumer electronics and in cars, where do we want fewer or more buttons or the
right.
same number of buttons? What do
Yeah.
you do with buttons and jacks and such, like headphone jack and the
Yeah.
charging ports and such.
Yeah.
And so you went with the voice.
And
You
do you
you
want
prefer the voice.
Bluetooth, for a headset,
Yes.
or do
Yes.
you want it to go over the speakers for a phone call? Or I'm sure we're still in the wild, wild west of all electronics going into cars. But the other thing to consider just quickly is that if I'm in a Lexus or in a high-end BMW, I have a different expectation of one, the feature sets and the functionality and ease of use than I do if I'm getting into oh, what's that Yugoslavian car that was Yugo? Do they even still make those?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard of
But
that.
if I'm only going to pay $12,000 for a brand new car, I really don't expect, surround cameras that, you stick your nose out and turn your signal on, and it
Yes. Yes.
shows you a view down the street that direction or upstream or whatever. Uh, I don't expect that level of sophistication. Yet, if I buy in a $50,000 or $100,000 car, it better just work. I
Yes.
better not be heading to
100%. Yes.
the dealership
Absolutely.
for it.
Yugo is correct. I just looked it up. Yugo
Okay.
Yugo is the Yugoslavian car. It actually looks yeah, I like the look of it.
Yeah, yeah. Some
Yeah.
people did, and they bought it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's an old joke in cars and electronics, and saying, if cars acted like Microsoft operating system, is every time you had a flat tire, you'd have to get everybody out of the car, close the doors, walk around the car, and get back in and turn it back on, and you'd be off and running again. It's one of those kind of things.
Yes. Get the ins out. Just
And every
say some
Tuesday at
prayers.
10 o'clock, you have to reboot everything 6 times to get the updates.
Yes, yes, yes. I agree. I think that's I think we're at a moment kind of a moment like that with charging stations for electric vehicles.
Yes.
I don't think there are charging stations where that are as good as gas stations at the moment, in terms of ease of use. You should be able to walk up, plug in, tap your car, and be able to charge, off you go. But I
Yeah.
don't think that is,
I heard
I don't think
rumor
we're quite
once
there yet.
years ago is that the decision for how big the nozzles were and the openings and how fast the fuel would pump into a gas tank, it was based on how long it takes to smoke a cigarette. And I thought they in the 50s they were thinking about this, but that was the time. And I'm like, this is not something you want to encourage people to do around a gas station.
No, exactly.
I think the marketing team probably pulled that off of the field when it was the Birds by Alfred Hitchcock came out. And the guy gets out, lights a cigarette, and the birds start, help him
Yeah.
start a fire, burn the place down. That probably, because it is a convenience thing. You stop, you get to take a break. A break is a smoke break, and it takes you, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, and you get your car's full of gas. Yet we don't have that equivalent for chargers. Even the fast chargers aren't that quick.
No,
So
and I think it's another great opportunity for improving the experience while you're waiting.
there you go. Exactly.
Like
We'll come back to that too.
if I'm not just sitting there, or I have other choices to be able to do things than just sitting there, then I won't mind waiting as long. So,
How about we have cars that just work? I saw
or we just, yes, exactly.
that it was ionic propulsion. It takes like 10 times the battery power of an electric motor. So it's got a ways to go. But I had no idea. It was something to do with ionizing the air to cause it to create a force on the car to propel it. And I thought, well, this is
Wow.
clever. It's not ready for
Yeah.
prime time yet,
Yeah.
but whenever it comes out, it's going to have a bazillion electronics on it. And hopefully the consumer electronics is car manufacturers are recognizing that you can't just stick a phone in a car and hope it works. It's a different environment, different expectations, all those aspects of it. And it takes different engineering to solve that problem. It's not just grab a laptop and stick it in there. That's not going to work. It's going to evolve. We're going to have automotive grade electronics for the cab, like we have automotive electronics for under the hood. They won't be as robust as under the hood, but they'll serve their purpose. It's still, I think a lot of people are still just sticking electronics in there because they can, and we'll see what works, what customers want. There's a lot of that still going on. But it's a good question. And you have to circle back with your friend here in a couple of weeks when this gets posted to see if we hit the target, if we missed it completely. That'd be interesting.
Yes, I will, definitely. I will ask him.
Yeah. And encourage him to ask more questions or suggest more things. And we do that with all of our listeners and friends of the show is, if you've got a question or something you're pondering, or how does this work or not work, and you like listening to two other people that know nothing about it to talk about it for a while. Well, we do noodle. If it's reliability, we know quite a bit. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, it's often a starting point for many of our episodes is somebody asks us a question, and we really, really enjoy that. So head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. You can find a couple of ways to get in touch with us. And Mojan and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our about pages on Accendo. So there's plenty of ways for you to get in touch. No excuse, run now, don't walk to your nearest phone or keyboard and send us a question. That'd be awesome. That sounds like advertising bad consumer electronics.
Well, we want questions. That is it. Yeah, we definitely want questions.
Definitely do. So keep up the marketing campaign there, and you've got some more friends, so you can
now I'm going to be asking everybody. Now the doors have opened.
There you go. That's awesome. I like it. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation if you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show. please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.